So our question is the use of the exchange rate policy as a tool to control inflation in Singapore. In this video, we will be explaining how the exchange rate policy can be used as a tool to control inflation, but at the same time, the problems it may cause.
The exchange rate policy is integral to a country's economic growth as it maintains the value of the currency in the global market. In Singapore, the exchange rate policy is unique as it is also used as a monetary policy to control inflation. So what is inflation? Inflation refers to the sustained increase in general price level and the fall in the purchasing value of money. First, let us take a look at the exchange rate policy in Singapore. Singapore's exchange rate system is managed against a basket of currencies of our major trading partners and competitors. It is trade-weighted such that the currencies of our larger trading partners bear more weight. This is reviewed periodically and the weight may be changed as our trade pattern changes. Secondly, the Singapore currency operates on a managed float exchange policy. So what is a managed float policy? It is basically a hybrid between fixed and floating exchange rates. It is when the exchange rates of Singapore are allowed to fluctuate from day to day within a policy band imposed by MAS called SNIL. This band is determined against the trade-weighted basket of currencies as mentioned previously. Under it, the exchange rate is determined by market forces of demand and supply, but the band set by MAS help to regulate the exchange rate to prevent any kind of excessive volatility or divergence from the target rate.
The exchange rate policy can effectively limit inflations in Singapore, which are mainly the import-driven inflation and the cost-push inflation. Import-driven inflation is the increase in prices of imports.
First, let's explain how the exchange rate policy is able to reduce import-driven inflation. To control import-driven inflation, the Monetary Authority of Singapore, MAS, can set a nominal effective exchange rate band NEER for a gradual appreciation of Singapore dollar against foreign currencies.
As Singapore dollar is being appreciated, Singapore currency will become stronger. A strong Singapore currency will cause prices of imported final goods to be regarded cheaper in Singapore's market. For example, if the current rate is 1 Sing dollar equals to 0.5 US dollars, and that 1 USA apple costs 2 US dollars, that means the price of that apple in Sing dollar is $4. But when the Singapore currency appreciates, the rate will now be 1 Sing dollar equivalent to 1 US dollar. Now, compare the rates before and after Singapore currency was appreciated. Based on the new rate, the price of that same US apple is only $2, which is cheaper than before Singapore currency was appreciated. Hence, import-driven inflation is reduced with the use of the exchange rate policy. Previously, we were discussing about how the exchange rate policy is able to reduce the import-driven inflation. Now, let's move on to cost-push inflation. So what exactly is cost-push inflation? Cost-push inflation refers to the increase in prices of inputs like labor and raw materials. The reduction of import-driven inflation lowers cost-push inflation. Since the managed float exchange rate policy of Singapore reduces the price of imports in terms of Singapore dollars, the prices of imported raw materials and intermediate goods that are used for the production of our own domestic goods are reduced as well. By having cheaper raw materials, it will reduce the cost of production. The aggregate demand curve AD, the aggregate supply curve AS. Since the cost of production is reduced, there will be a shift in the aggregate supply AS curve to the right or downwards, as shown in the graph. From the graph, the price level decreases from P1 to P2. The fall in price indicates that inflation is controlled. However, the use of exchange rate policy will lead to other problems in the economy.
One of the problems will be a contraction in our economy. For the exchange rate policy to be effective in controlling inflation, the value of SGD will have to be appreciated. This means that the MAS has to purchase more Singaporean currency to cause its values to increase and thus appreciated. However, the appreciation of SGD causes prices of our export goods to rise, which lowers our competitiveness and eventually our aggregate demand in the global market. Since aggregate demand for our goods are lowered, our export revenues are also reduced. This results in a fall of national income. This may cause the economy to contract, which worsens unemployment and slows economic growth within the country. Also, the exchange rate policy is highly dependent on the amount of foreign reserves. When we lose foreign currencies, they cannot be sold off to purchase Singapore dollar to cause appreciation of the snail band. Since the value of SGD cannot be appreciated, the exchange rate policy is no longer effective. This thus proves that the exchange rate policy is a highly volatile tool that cannot always be relied upon. To sum it all up, the exchange rate policy in Singapore is still effective. Singapore is a developed country with low unemployment rate of 1.9% and stable GDP growth of 3.9%. The lack of export revenue will not cause significant negative backlashes on the market. Overall, it has maintained inflation at a low of 2 to 3% since 2011, thus proving the exchange rate policy to be an effective tool.